The monitor beeped like a slow countdown. Antiseptic clung to the air, but nothing stung more than watching my own son hesitate with the pen. That moment plays in my head more than it should. Not the fourth needle in my hand. Not the ache in my chest. Not the room number on the door. Just his hand, hovering above the signature line, and then pulling back like the ink might bite him. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Bernard Calhoun. I'm 74 years old, and this is what really happened. It started in a hospital room in Athens, Georgia, a town where the air smells like honeysuckle in summer and wet asphalt in winter. That morning it smelled like bleach and old plastic, sterile, manufactured, like life had been scrubbed out and only procedure remained. I'd been admitted 3 nights earlier after a dizzy spell at the pharmacy. 1 second I was reaching for a bottle of aspirin. The next, the floor tilted like the deck of a ship. The nurse at the counter said I was out cold for less than 30 seconds. They called it syncope. A simple word, but the way the EMTs looked at me, I could see the weight behind it. Truth was, it wasn't the first time. I'd had a faint spell in the garage last spring, another in the church parking lot that autumn. I brushed those off as dehydration, skipped meals, too much coffee. But this time, it felt different, like a curtain had been tugged aside and I'd glimpsed what was waiting if I kept pretending. The doctors ran the usual gauntlet: CT scan, EKG, blood panels. I'd been through enough machines to feel like a car getting diagnostics at my old shop. Every beep, every printout, a reminder that this body wasn't built to last forever. When they came back, their voices were polite, professional, but clipped. "Mr. Calhoun, we're recommending a stent procedure. It isn't immediate emergency, but it's necessary. The longer we delay, the higher the risk of a cardiac event." Routine, they called it. Covered, they promised, but only if the forms were signed and someone assumed responsibility for decisions until I recovered. "Do you have a next of kin authorized on file, Mr. Calhoun?" the nurse asked. Clipboard balanced against her hip, pen ready. "My son," I told her. "Evan. He's got power of attorney." She nodded, making a neat checkmark on the form. "Great. We'll need his signature for the pre-op authorization." And just like that, my health, my survival, hinged not on a doctor, not on fate, but on a single pen stroke from my only child. Evan came the next morning, dressed for work, like always. Navy slacks, polished brown shoes, tie tucked neatly beneath a charcoal peacoat. Not a wrinkle on him. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom or a boardroom, not at the side of his father's hospital bed. He even brought coffee. Vanilla cream, 2 sugars, my old order, back when mornings meant grease under my nails and engines, waiting to be coaxed back to life. I stared at the cup longer than I should have, the smell of coffee fighting with the hospital's disinfectant. "Dad," he said brightly, pulling up the chair, "they said you're looking good." I smiled faintly. "I feel good, all things considered. Just need to get this thing done, and I'll be out by the weekend." He nodded, but he didn't meet my eyes. The doctor entered, calm and precise. He went through the risks, the benefits, the timeline. Words I barely heard because I was watching my son's face, watching the way his jaw tightened when cost was mentioned, the way his fingers flexed when responsibility was implied. Finally, the nurse set the clipboard in front of him. Evan lifted the pen, held it like it weighed more than steel. His eyes traced the lines once, twice, and then he said it. "Can I take a day to think this over?" The room changed. It wasn't the air conditioning kicking in. It was colder than that. The nurse shifted her weight, uncomfortable. The doctor's lips pressed thin. "Of course," the nurse said quickly. Too quickly. "But the sooner we proceed, the lower the—" "I understand," Evan interrupted, his voice smooth but final. He set the pen down gently, like it might explode. "It's just, there are estate considerations. I'll call you." Estate considerations, he left 5 minutes later. The coffee sat untouched. His footsteps faded down the hall, quieter than the heart monitor, keeping time beside me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The beep of the monitor matched the rhythm of my thoughts, steady, then slower. Each beat a reminder of the paper he hadn't signed. He had the chance. He had the power. He had my trust. And he walked away. Not out of confusion, not out of ignorance. No, Evan understood exactly what he was doing. That's what cut the deepest. After my wife passed, I'd made him my decision maker for health and estate. Durable power of attorney. Signed in good faith, believing he would carry my interests as if they were his own. What I didn't realize, or maybe didn't want to admit, was how much he'd come to see that paper as leverage instead of duty. A year ago, when I still owned my home outright, he convinced me to restructure assets into a trust. Said it would help with taxes. He'd majored in finance, so I trusted him. Later, I discovered he'd attached his name to rights I barely understood. Rights that meant he could choose if my treatment went forward. That night, the IV in my arm ached. My chest tightened. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting stains, trying not to think about the fact that my own son was calculating my worth in dollars. But someone else noticed. The nurse from earlier came back during evening rounds. Middle-aged, round glasses, steady voice. She drew the curtain and sat on the edge of the chair. "Mr. Calhoun," she said gently, "may I speak freely?" "Please do. That conversation earlier with your son, just so you know it was recorded." I blinked. "Recorded?" She nodded. "We use tablets to log critical interactions, protect staff and patients. The unit was active the entire time. Audio's saved in the hospital system." She hesitated. "Would you like to file a concern about medical neglect?" My chest tightened. My first instinct was no. He was my son. But another voice, quieter, stronger, whispered, "Protect yourself." "I don't want to file anything yet," I said. "But that, can I get a copy?" Her eyes softened. "Under Georgia law, one-party consent applies. Since it was your care, you're entitled." "Then keep it safe," I told her. My voice cracked, but my resolve didn't. The next morning, Evan didn't show. No call, no message. The nurse returned, lips pressed tight. I spoke with the social worker. "If this stretches past 48 hours, we can initiate an ethics review. Explore temporary alternatives." Her words were careful, but her eyes weren't. She was telling me what I already knew. They could override his silence. I asked her, "That recording, does it capture him saying, 'There are estate considerations'?" She nodded. "Clear as day." "Don't lose it," I whispered. By nightfall, my breathing was heavier, not from fear, from clarity, because in the drawer beside my bed was a folder, a second file I'd prepared months ago, after a Thanksgiving dinner, where Evan, half joking, it asked if I'd ever thought of downsizing early. Inside that folder was the contact from my attorney, the original power of attorney, and something else, an amendment Evan didn't know existed. I had updated it, quietly, legally. In Georgia, you don't need to inform a former agent when you revoke a POA. All it takes is a notary and a filing with the county clerk. I had done that 2 weeks earlier. All I had to do was pick up the phone, call the number, but I didn't. Not yet. Because part of me, the father in me, still wanted to give him one more chance. One last test. By noon the next day, the answer was clear. The nurse told me she'd heard nothing. No visit, no call. I reached for the drawer, pulled out the folder, dialed the number. When my attorney answered, my voice was steady. "Activate the amendment," I said, and then I closed the drawer. The monitor beeped on, slow, steady, like a heartbeat choosing itself. The hallway outside my room smelled like lemon polish and something sharper, sterile, synthetic, like the kind of cleanliness that tries too hard to mask what's rotting underneath. The kind of smell that clings to you, seeps into your hair, and lingers on your clothes long after you've left. Nurses moved quietly, almost too quietly, like trained ghosts floating down the corridor. Shoes whispering across linoleum, charts cradled in their arms like secrets, their voices hushed, almost reverent, as if even the walls could break under the weight of something spoken too loudly. From the visitors' lounge came the faint glow of a TV, mounted too high and playing muted reruns of Family Feud. A frozen smile on a contestant's face, lips moving without sound. I could almost fill in the laugh track in my head, hollow and canned. The kind of cheer that feels cruel when your own chest aches with every breath. And beneath it all was my own sound, the squeak of my wheelchair tires against the linoleum, a small grating noise that followed me everywhere, like a clock ticking down towards something I didn't want to name. They moved me to the third floor that afternoon, cardiac pre-op. The official story was monitoring. That's what they told me. That's what they wrote in the chart. But I knew better. It was the first quiet consequence of being a patient whose family had left them dangling, a man in limbo. Still no call from Evan. The ethics board flagged the situation for review. I only found out because the nurse, the one with the calm voice and steady hands, leaned over to adjust my oxygen line and said it softly, like she didn't want the walls to overhear. She had her tablet with her. Every word she spoke, she tapped in twice. Once for me, once for the record. We're documenting everything, she told me. Her voice was smooth but deliberate, the way people sound when they've said the same sentence 100 times, but still want it to matter. Until your updated paperwork kicks in, hospital policy requires that we keep a daily log of all attempts to contact your listed POA. Her pen tapped twice against the screen. A confirmation ding, low and final. And if he doesn't respond? I asked. My voice rasped more than I intended. 72 hours of silence after a critical care recommendation? She paused, looking at me over her glasses. We file for emergency override, and now that you've submitted your POA amendment. He has no authority left, I finished for her. Her eyes lingered on me a moment. Then she asked carefully, "And he doesn't know that yet, does he?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. But she smiled anyway, not unkind, like she understood something unsaid, something only a parent in my position could feel. The silence from Evan was loud in all the ways silence can be. Not even a check-in, not a text, not a lazy, "How are you holding up, Dad?" Just nothing. A vacuum where care should have been. And yet, part of me wasn't surprised. You could say I raised him too gently, or maybe not gently enough. I've asked myself that question 100 different ways, and none of them give me peace. All I know is I gave him everything, my time, my trust, the money for his tuition, and he used each one like it was his birthright. After Margaret passed, Evan moved quickly, too quickly. The grief was still raw, and I was still learning how to sleep without her beside me. But he started suggesting streamlining, consolidating accounts, prepaying burial plots, drafting a will while you're still sharp, Dad. It sounded practical. Evan always had a way of making things sound practical, like he was protecting me, like he was thinking ahead. But each suggestion came with one less choice for me, and one more signature for him. By the second night, I asked for something strange. Could I see the visitor log? I asked the front desk nurse. He was a young guy, lean, tattoos creeping out from under his scrubs. The kind of kid who probably rode a motorcycle home and played drums on weekends. He looked puzzled. "You mean for your room?" "Anyone who's come by. Anyone who's tried to sign in." He frowned, but tapped into his system anyway, fingers flying across the keys, screen glow painting his face. "Just one," he said finally. 2 hours ago. Didn't leave a name. Just asked if Bernard Calhoun was under care. Then walked out when we said yes. That detail hit me like a chill. Did they leave anything? He shook his head. Nothing. No note. No gift. But something about it stuck with me. Someone had been here. close enough to ask, close enough to turn away. The next morning, the hospital social worker came in. Her name was Carla, mid-50s, sensible shoes, kind eyes. She carried a yellow folder like it was heavier than paper should ever be. "Mr. Calhoun," she said, setting the folder on my tray, "your new POA documentation has been verified. We've updated your chart. Effective immediately, all medical decisions fall to the new agent." I sat up a little straighter, the oxygen tugging at my nose. "Has the previous agent been notified?" "Only if you choose to notify them," she said. "I don't," I replied without hesitation. She nodded once, as if she expected that answer. Then she handed me the folder. "Here's the confirmation copy. And for what it's worth, sir, you're not the first patient who's had to do this, but you might be the first one who came this prepared." A smile crept across my face, faint but real. A mechanic always knows to keep a spare key. Carla chuckled softly. Then she left me with the folder, and the steady hum of my monitor filled the silence again. Later that afternoon, the nurse returned with the phone. "Your son's calling," she said, her tone unreadable. "Put him on speaker," I told her. My chest tightened, but not from fear. The line clicked. His voice came through smooth as ever. "Evan. Hey, Dad. Sorry, I've been swamped. I've been talking to some estate lawyers, trying to figure out the best way to manage things long term. I didn't want to make a rushed decision." Me. "You had the forms for 2 days." Evan. "Yeah, I wanted to make sure we weren't locking into something expensive. You know how these hospitals can be. Better to delay a few days than sign the wrong thing." Me. "Too late?" A pause. Static filled the space. Evan. "What do you mean?" Me. "You're not my POA anymore." The silence on the line was heavier than any words. Evan. "Wait. What?" Me. "It's been revoked, reassigned, properly notarized, and already filed with Clark County. Hospital Ethics Board accepted the change this morning." Evan's voice sharpened, no longer smooth, no longer pretending. Evan. "You can't do that." Me. "I already did." Another pause, then sharper still. Evan. "Who did you give it to?" I didn't answer. I let the silence speak for me. He hung up. The nurse turned off the speakerphone slowly. Her brow furrowed. That was illuminating. I exhaled through my nose. "He just showed his cards." "Uh-huh. And now?" she asked softly. "Now we let him stew." That evening I made another request. "I want Evan removed from my emergency contact list," I told the nurse. She didn't question me. She just nodded. "This also removes his access to your room, Mr. Calhoun. Is that what you want?" Yes. And my heart didn't skip. Not from guilt, not from fear, but from clarity. I was no longer waiting for him to act right, no longer standing in a doorway holding it open for someone who'd already walked away. The next twist came just past visiting hours. There was a soft knock at my door. 3 light taps, hesitant but steady. Then the door eased open. A woman stepped in, tall, mid-40s, auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, a green cardigan over a simple blouse. She carried a small canvas tote. Her perfume hit me first. Peppermint and something floral beneath it, calming and clean. I blinked. "Angela?" She nodded. "It's been a while." Angela. Evan's ex-sister-in-law. Margaret's niece. The woman Evan once dismissed as too sentimental to handle money when we discussed executors for our will. And here she was, standing in the doorway with that canvas tote, like it contained something that mattered. She crossed the room, sat down beside me, unzipped the bag. Inside, a folder, a second copy of the POA amendment, and a tiny silver key. "What's the key for?" I asked, voice low. Her smile was soft. "The safety deposit box. I moved everything you asked for." I stared at her. "You remember everything?" Angela pressed a hand to her chest. "Word for word. You dictated it to me over coffee at Cracker Barrel. I typed it up, We notarized it, and I've been waiting, just like you said. Warmth spread through me. Not just relief, gratitude. Proof that someone had been listening. Someone who didn't ask, "What's in it for me?" but instead, "How do I help?" The monitor beeped steadily as I leaned back against the pillows. "Angela," I said softly, "tomorrow, I want you to deliver that second copy to my lawyer, along with this." I handed her the hospital's sealed envelope, the time-stamped transcript of Evan's refusal, his words, his hesitation, his betrayal, recorded forever. "You're sure?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Let's make it official." The monitor beeped again. Steady, calm, just like me. The next morning brought rain to Athens. Thin sheets of water drifted across the windows of the third-floor wing, turning the glass into a canvas of blurred gray. Every drop traced its own crooked path downward, merging into rivulets that caught the hallway lights in fractured reflections. From inside, the effect made the world outside look distant, unreachable, like a half-forgotten dream. The fluorescent fixtures overhead hummed faintly, their pale glow bouncing off the freshly waxed tiles. Every reflection stretched long and thin, like faint ghosts drifting from doorway to doorway. Beyond the glass, the magnolia trees bent under the weight of the rain, their broad leaves sagging, each droplet sliding down until it fell with a soundless finality. It looked for all the world as if the trees themselves were weeping, but inside things were finally moving. Angela returned just after sunrise. I heard her before I saw her, the hurried rhythm of her shoes in the corridor, the squeak of wet soles against tile. She slipped into the room quietly, cardigan damp at the cuffs, cheeks flushed pink from the chill morning air. Her auburn hair, still damp in places, clung in loose strands around her temples. She carried no bag this time, only a slim leather folder pressed tightly against her chest, as if it contained something far more fragile than paper. "It's done," she said, closing the door softly behind her. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the effort behind it. Hand-delivered to Marlowe's office before they even opened. Marlowe, my estate lawyer, a woman who'd known my handwriting for decades, who drafted the original trust, the addendums, the amendment Angela had helped me set in motion, the one Evan had never known about. Angela's fingers lingered on the edge of the folder before she finally placed it on the table beside my bed. She said she'll file the trust clause activation within the hour. Your name stays on everything. Evans is suspended pending review. I let out a slow breath, my chest easing with the words. And the hospital? Angela smiled faintly, but there was no triumph in it, only quiet certainty. Your medical log has already been updated. They've copied Marlowe's office and removed Evan from all estate liaison notes. He'll get a letter today. I nodded once, firmly. Good. The window light shifted, sharpened. I could hear the IV drip at my side, but the sound was faint beneath the sharper rustle of paper as Angela slid open the envelope inside the folder. The snap of it carried through the room like a gavel striking wood. She placed the copy of the clause on my lap. The words were crisp, unambiguous, carved in legal stone. Caretaker Clause, Section 4, B.1. Any named heir or estate beneficiary who demonstrably fails to provide reasonable aid in a documented medical emergency shall forfeit all access, inheritance, and fiduciary responsibility upon presentation of evidence and confirmation by the grantor or newly appointed power of attorney. The ink was dry. The notary's seal shimmered faintly against the page. Witnesses' signatures lined the bottom in neat practice strokes. The timestamp sat in the corner, 11 weeks before Evan had ever touched that clipboard, a failsafe, built quietly, hidden in plain sight, and now activated cleanly. The hospital's social worker came later that morning. Carla again, steady as ever, with her sensible shoes squeaking softly on the tile. She carried a clipboard, but this one bore only a single form, the weight of it far heavier than its pages. "Mr. Calhoun," she said gently, her tone practiced but kind, "we've reviewed your case under our patient protection policy. Based on the verified neglect, the submitted POA change, and the supporting documentation, we've formally granted full decision authority to Miss Braddock." Angela straightened in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She gave only a small nod. Carla continued, "Additionally, we're filing a formal note that the previous POA declined critical treatment without due cause. If necessary, this record can be submitted to a probate judge." She didn't need to explain the weight of that. I already knew. In Georgia, such a note wasn't just a bureaucratic formality. It meant Evan could be summoned to explain himself in court. And with the audio file preserved by the nurse's tablet, every word time-stamped, he would have nothing to hide behind. I turned to Angela. "How long until it's irreversible?" She clasped her hands tighter. "Once the county clerk logs the clause activation and the hospital signs off, the clock starts. He has 30 days to contest, but the evidence is airtight." I nodded slowly, feeling the tension leave my shoulders, and then I exhaled, heavier than I meant to. It felt like air I'd been holding for months. Around noon, Evan showed up, not at my bedside, not even on the third floor. He showed up downstairs in the lobby, but by then his name wasn't listed as family anymore. The nurse, a young woman with a clipped ponytail and quick steps, caught sight of him through the front desk glass. She glanced at the monitor, then came into my room. "Sir," she said carefully, "your son is in the lobby. He's demanding to speak with the attending physician." Her words landed heavy, but my response was light, steady. "Let security handle it. Politely." She nodded once, disappearing back into the hall. From the small camera feed that played silently in the corner of the nurse's station monitor, I watched. 2 uniformed security staff approached him. Their hands never touched him. They didn't need to. They simply gestured to the sliding glass doors. Evan didn't resist, but he turned and he looked up, straight toward the 3rd floor, toward me. Our eyes didn't meet, not really, but I saw his face clearly enough. It wasn't twisted with anger. It wasn't hollowed by guilt. It was confusion. Confusion at how quickly the ground had shifted beneath him, at how his certainty had been pulled away like a rug. He didn't understand how fast everything had flipped. Back in the room, Angela poured a paper cup of cafeteria coffee. It was weak, watery, barely more than brown liquid, but the warmth of it filled the space between us. She handed me the trust reactivation document, her hand brushing mine as she passed it over. "This," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "is the one that officially cuts Evan from the estate, unless he can prove legitimate medical concern." I looked at her, then at the document. My answer came without hesitation. "He won't." Angela shrugged lightly. "He might try, but we've got the transcript, the nurse's testimony, the delay logs, and even the visitor registry." She tapped the final page with her finger. "Marlowe already filed with the probate office this morning." "What's the filing ID?" I asked. Her lips curved in a half smile, and she read it aloud. "Probate claim number CC-GA-1073-T." I repeated it under my breath. The numbers tasted cold in my mouth, like steel. To anyone else, it was just a string of digits. To me, it was a clean break. The doctor entered not long after, carrying his own clipboard, his white coat swaying slightly as he walked. "Mr. Calhoun," he said, his tone professional, but lighter than it had been in days. "Your vitals are steady. We can schedule the procedure tomorrow. Now that we have clearance, there's nothing holding us back." For the first time in what felt like forever, I inhaled, without second-guessing the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I turned my head toward Angela. She gave me a slow nod, her eyes steady, reassuring. No words were necessary. I looked back at the doctor. "Go ahead and schedule it." That night, As the wind rattled harder against the rain-slicked windows, I sat awake in the dark. The monitor beside me kept its steady rhythm, a soft metronome marking the seconds. I thought about Margaret, her laugh, her patience, her endless way of softening corners I never knew were sharp until she touched them. I thought about the years I spent believing love alone could shape a son into the man you hoped he'd be. And I thought about Evan's face, not when I told him no, but when I told him it was no longer his decision. That look, that moment, that realization that the power he had assumed eternal was gone. There was something final about that. Not cruel, not vengeful, just necessary. Some inheritances aren't about money. They're about silence, about distance, about never asking, "Why didn't you?" Because deep down, they already know. The last sound I heard before sleep pulled me under wasn't the rain, or the monitor, or the creak of the pipes. It was Angela's voice, low but steady, from the chair at my side. "I'll be here in the morning." She didn't say it like a promise. She said it like a fact. The morning of the procedure, the rain had stopped. The silence outside felt almost staged, like the whole town had wrung itself out overnight and now stood washed, emptied, waiting for whatever came next. The sky over Athens was pale, the kind of thin, unforgiving blue you only see in southern winters. Everything was still damp, sidewalks slick, branches dripping, cars parked along the curb reflecting light like mirrors. But the clarity was absolute. It was as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Inside, the hospital shifted into its morning rhythm. The staff moved like clock hands, steady and deliberate. Shoes squeaked softly against polished tile. Carts hummed across the linoleum. Voices rose and fell in practiced cadences. There was no rush, no panic. Just the kind of quiet assurance that came from repetition. Angela was already there. She sat by the window, the weak sunlight falling across her green cardigan, her auburn hair catching in the pale glow. A notepad rested on her lap, though her pen wasn't moving. Instead, she flipped slowly through a manila folder I hadn't seen before, her fingers brushing the edges of each page as though grounding herself in the paper. When I stirred, shifting against the pillows, she looked up immediately. Her smile was small, soft, the kind she used when she didn't want to draw more attention to a moment than it already carried. "I brought something," she said quietly. I cleared my throat. "What is it?" She lifted the folder slightly. "Insurance confirmation, medical directive approvals, and a copy of your will. The new one." I blinked. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Already?" She nodded. "Marlowe fast-tracked everything after the trust clause activated. The estate has officially shifted to protect its status. All future decisions, financial, medical, and legal, are now filtered through me." Her tone wasn't proud. It wasn't smug. It was calm, matter of fact. Like someone who had prepared her whole life to carry a burden and had finally been allowed to pick it up. Like she'd been practicing the role Evan should have filled for years, and now it simply fit. The attending physician entered next. Middle-aged, trim-billed, sharp eyes behind thin glasses. His voice carried that measured calm that only seasoned doctors seem to master. Not rushed, not rehearsed. Just certain, like the procedure ahead of us was a road he had walked 100 times before. He reviewed my chart with a quiet authority, flipping each page as though it were ritual. After the rundown of vitals, the risks, the anesthesia, he paused. His gaze flicked up from the papers. "There's one thing I should let you know," he said. Angela leaned forward slightly. "Your son," the doctor continued, "Evan, he's requested access to your records. Again." Angela's expression didn't shift. "Did you grant it?" The doctor shook his head once, firmly. "Number pair the revoked POA documentation and the clause activation, he no longer has clearance. We've notified him via certified letter and secure hospital log. He was told to contact his counsel if he had concerns." I exhaled slowly. And did he? Yes, but so far nothing has been filed. We've also placed a do not discuss hold on your profile, Mr. Calhoun, effective under HIPAA protections. None of our staff are permitted to release information to him. Angela reached into the folder, her tone even. I had Marlowe file a notice of legal restriction on your estate, too. Any attempt to interfere during your recovery triggers a restraining clause. I turned my head toward her. Restraining clause? She slid a page from the folder, smoothing it flat with her palm, and read aloud. Clause 6C.1. Any beneficiary who, upon documented notification of estate modification, attempts to pressure, contact, or unduly influence the grantor during a declared medical recovery shall be considered in violation of fiduciary trust and removed from all secondary disbursements. The words were sharp as glass. A faint smile tugged at my lips. That one was your idea. Angela's eyes softened, but her answer was simple. I knew he'd try something. By mid-morning, the prep team arrived. The hallway lights gleamed against their face shields, reflections bending and warping across the plastic. The air grew colder as they wheeled me through the long corridor toward the surgical wing. The tiles passed in steady rhythm beneath me, like mile markers on a road stretching away from the version of my life where Evan had any control. Angela walked beside the gurney, her hand resting lightly on the metal rail, not gripping, just there, a quiet presence I could feel without needing to look. See you after? I asked, my voice low, rough with the edge of anesthesia waiting at the horizon. You bet, she replied, no hesitation, no doubt. The procedure went fine. 3 hours later, I was back in my room, groggy, disoriented, but alive. The doctors said my heart was stronger than they expected. The stent had set perfectly. My vitals were stable, even steady. Angela never left. When I blinked awake fully, the room blurred and then sharpened. She was sitting beside me, the manila folder still within reach. She lifted a cold ginger ale, a straw already placed inside, and guided it toward me. You're in the clear, she whispered, her voice warm, close. All of it. And I knew she didn't just mean the surgery. That afternoon, Evan made his final move. He showed up at the county clerk's office with a copy of the old POA, the one we'd revoked. He tried to file a complaint of undue influence, claimed Angela had manipulated me, that she'd forged documents, that I wasn't of sound mind. He even brought a lawyer, not one of the small-town kind, a sharp one from Atlanta, dressed like money, voice smooth as glass and cold as marble. But none of it mattered, because by the time they walked through the courthouse doors, Marlowe had already beaten them there. She had submitted a full evidentiary bundle to the civil clerk before sunrise. The packet was airtight, time-stamped audio from the hospital nurse's tablet, witness statement from the attending nurse on duty, visitor log showing Evan's absence during critical decision windows, notarized POA revocation filed 2 weeks prior. Clause 4, B.1 trigger confirmation. Clause 6, C.1 enforcement draft. Angela's appointment letter and emergency contact registration. A pre-signed letter from me, dated the day after my Thanksgiving scare, confirming my awareness, intent, and amendment choice. Every line crossed, every box checked. The civil clerk rejected Evan's complaint within an hour. The POA he clutched was legally void. The accusations he muttered were baseless, contradicted at every angle by documents and timestamps. He left the courthouse without a word, but not before Marlowe's paralegal intercepted him. She pressed a certified envelope into his hand, her face expressionless. Inside, Angela had tucked a single-page notice. At the top, a photocopy of the trust clause, highlighted in yellow. It read, per your recorded failure to act on March 4th in confirmed violation of Section 4, B.1, all estate, medical, and fiduciary rights are permanently revoked. You are entitled to nothing. Further legal threats will be met with formal restraint. Bernard L. Calhoun. I signed it myself, black ink. steady hand. Angela had walked it to the notary herself. That evening, back in my hospital room, the air felt lighter. I sat propped up in bed, the soft sound of old jazz filling the corners from a small radio speaker. The smell of soap and fresh hospital laundry lingered faintly in the air, clean, peaceful. Angela returned with a bag from the cafeteria. Inside were a handful of grapes, still cool from the fridge, and a slice of lemon pound cake wrapped in wax paper. She unwrapped it, cut it in half with a plastic knife, and handed me a piece. "You ever regret it?" she asked as she set her fork down. I looked at her. "What's that?" "Not telling him off sooner." I let the question sit, took a slow breath, chewed a grape until the tart sweetness cut through the antiseptic air. "No," I said finally, "because now he knows exactly why I didn't." Angela nodded, thoughtful. "I think he's still trying to understand what happened." A dry chuckle rose in my throat. "Then maybe he'll finally learn something." Just before lights out, the nurse entered. She carried an envelope, sealed and stamped, and set it gently on the tray table beside me. "What's this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Came from the hospital legal office. They said it's yours now." My fingers traced the edge of the envelope before I opened it. Inside was the final document. Probate confirmation trust clause. Triggered permanent. Stamped. Dated. Final. I closed the envelope slowly, placed it back on the tray, and let my hand rest against it for a moment. Then I reached for the remote, clicked the button, and turned off the light. The following week passed quietly. Quieter than I expected. Quieter than I thought a hospital could ever be. My recovery moved faster than the doctors predicted, not because of luck, not even because of the stent itself, but because something heavier had been lifted. The tension that had been pressing down on every breath, coiled around every heartbeat like a fist, had finally loosened. The monitor no longer felt like a countdown. Each beep was steady, patient, like a metronome that had found its rhythm again. The air was easier to breathe. Even the bland hospital food seemed lighter on my tongue. Or maybe it wasn't the food at all. Maybe it was the lemon pound cake Angela kept sneaking in from downstairs. Soft, sweet, citrus cutting through antiseptic air. Every bite reminded me I was still alive. By the 6th day, they cleared me for discharge. Angela was waiting outside in the parking circle. She leaned against her forest green Subaru, arms crossed, the engine humming, the heater running, the exhaust curled in faint white ribbons against the crisp air. It was the kind of southern winter morning that bites at your nose, but underneath it, you can almost smell spring, waiting. She spotted me through the glass doors, pushed herself off the car, and walked forward. She opened the passenger door with a motion that was simple, practiced, but carried weight. Then she looked at me with that familiar expression, not pity, not worry, just presence. "You ready to go home?" she asked softly. I didn't hesitate. "Let's go." Home. Still the same brick ranch. Still the 2-story oak out front, its branches bare but reaching wide like old arms. Still the sagging porch swing Margaret had picked out at a church fundraiser 30 years ago, the chains creaking when the wind pushed it side to side. But something about it felt different now, because it was mine again, legally, fully, free of shadows, free of someone hovering like a vulture, waiting for the final cough before swooping down with paperwork and counterfeit grief. Angela walked me inside. She flicked on the lights with one hand, then went window to window, opening the curtains. Sunlight spilled across the old wood floors, turning dust motes into flecks of gold. She didn't ask what I needed, didn't wait for instructions. She already knew. She was written into the documents now, not as a beneficiary, but as the executor of what mattered, the one who would keep everything in place, the person I trusted when my body gave out and my son gave up. Later that afternoon, a letter came. The envelope was thin, too thin to carry anything good or heavy. Not from Evan, from his lawyer. One page, a formal acknowledgement of the clause enforcement. Signed, sealed, no appeal, no further filings. Just a single line at the end, neat and impersonal. My client acknowledges that he will no longer pursue any claims to the estate of Bernard Sil Calhoun. No apology, no explanation, not even an attempt at softening the blow. Just silence. The kind of silence I could live with. 3 days later, I made my own trip. Angela drove me to the courthouse in downtown Athens. I stepped through the heavy glass doors with a cane in one hand and a leather folder tucked under the other arm. She walked beside me, steadying me when the marble stairs slowed me down. Inside that folder were the last estate amendments I would ever need. Evan's name, removed from every asset pathway. Angela's, elevated to sole decision-maker if my health declined again. A line-item donation to the cardiac wing at the hospital, in Margaret's name. And a note, handwritten, to be sealed with the trust and read aloud when it eventually closed. I handed the papers to the clerk, but before I let them go, I asked him something unusual. "Would you mind," I said, "if I read this one aloud, just once?" He raised his eyebrows but nodded, so I unfolded the note. My own handwriting stared back at me, shaky in places but clear. I read it, steady, to those who thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. To the ones who mistook love for leverage. It wasn't. I didn't say no because I was weak. I waited because I wanted you to show who you were without being asked. And you did. The words hung in the still air of the courthouse. I folded the paper slowly, handed it to the clerk. He stared at me, lips parted but silent. And that silence, heavy, wordless, felt like justice. The last time I saw Evan was 2 weeks later. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary, almost quiet. I was sitting in a corner booth at the Cracker Barrel, the same booth where Angela and I had once spread papers and scribbled amendments over cups of weak coffee. She was inside at the register, paying for our meal. I was watching the parking lot through the window, the sunlight glinting off windshields, the sound of muffled chatter rolling through the dining room. That's when Evan pulled in, not by accident. He saw me, his eyes locked on the booth, on me. For a moment he sat in the car, gripping the wheel. Then slowly he stepped out. No briefcase this time, no suit jacket, just a wrinkled button-down shirt and a look I couldn't pin down. He walked toward me, stopped a few feet from the table. "Dad," he said. I looked up at him, said nothing. He waited as though expecting me to motion him into the seat, like he still believed the old rules might apply, like maybe I would fold just one more time. But I didn't. He cleared his throat, gestured vaguely. I thought maybe we could talk, clear things up." "About what?" I asked. My voice was calm, flat. He swallowed hard. "About everything. The paperwork. Angela. The trust. I didn't mean—" "But you did," I cut in. Quiet, sharp. "You meant every hesitation, every silence, every skipped visit." His eyes fell to the floor. I pressed on. "You thought I was already gone. That's the only reason you started counting." "I didn't think—" he began. "You did," I said again, firmer this time. "And now you're here because the numbers didn't land the way you planned." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. At that moment, Angela returned from the register, receipt in her hand. She stopped in the aisle when she saw him. "Evan," she said evenly. He nodded once, stiff. "Angela." He glanced back at me, eyes searching for something, an opening, a lifeline. Forgiveness, maybe. But all I gave him was silence. Finally, he straightened. "I guess I'll go." "Guess so," I said. He turned, walked out. No handshake, no hug, no attempt to bridge the chasm he'd carved himself. Just footsteps fading, and the faint jingle of the doorbell as it closed behind him. That night, I slept without the monitor for the first time in weeks. No beeps, no machines, No tubes or wires, just the sound of my own breath, my own heart, my own silence, and with it, the knowledge that the man who tried to play air with a pen and a waiting room had been left with nothing but echoes. I don't know what Evan will tell people. Maybe he'll say I was manipulated. Maybe he'll pretend he was never involved. Maybe he'll blame Angela, or the lawyers, or even me. But deep down, he knows. He knows what he did. And more importantly, he knows I know. That's enough, because revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like silence that can't be bought back. Sometimes it sounds like a monitor going quiet because the man in the bed finally stood, walked out, and locked the door behind him. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.